I promised you guys that I would do a detailed race recap after California International Marathon 2022, so here it is. Yo, what's going on everybody? Kofuzi here, and I just wanted to give you guys a detailed race recap because it's something I haven't really done in the past few marathons that I've run, so I thought I'd do it here, especially because I feel like CIM is a race that people don't get to do a lot of in-person reconnaissance on, but especially for 2023, as people are starting to get ready, starting to think about how to prepare for this race, I thought this could be kind of like both a course preview, but also my race recap for my second time running it in 2022. So overall, from a kind of global perspective, we'll go from like big details and then get into the nitty gritty, go like 5K by 5K over how my race went. But starting out globally, I thought I was somewhere in between 3 hour and 3:05 shape. I came in just at 3:04:37 for my chip time, so just squeaked it in there. Overall, really happy with the day. It had been a long week, a long season, a long year, and just happy that I got another fun marathon, another hard effort under the belt, another chance to try and master that 26.2. Let's go over some of the bigger details as well. I'll go over kind of like race kit, nutrition, strategy, and all that kind of stuff. So as far as race kit goes, for the shoes, I went with the Superblast, which is not ASIC's like top tier racing shoe, but it's a shoe that I've been enjoying for marathon pace efforts. So I thought I'd give it a try. This is my 5th marathon this year, and I've tried a different shoe every single marathon. I've run in the Metaspeed Sky Plus, Metaspeed Sky 1, Endorphin Pro 3, SC Elite 3, and then for next year in Boston, I'll doing the Adios Pro 3. So kind of giving everyone a shot. I already had my PR earlier this year at Grandma's, finally broke 3. So I'm like playing with house money and thought I'd give the Superblast a try. And ultimately, I feel like that ended up being a pretty good choice for me. Although I do feel like there were definitely parts of the race, especially deeper later in the race, when I felt like I could have used something a little bit more aggressive, where I feel like sometimes like when you're tired, getting that positive feedback from like a kind of a little bit more of a sensitive or twitchy marathon shoe, something that has that carbon in there and can give you that positive feedback for when your foot strike is hitting right on and when it's not. I think that would have been a little bit more helpful to me, and I just kind of was missing it at the end. But overall, like, I felt like for most of the race, I didn't really notice that I didn't have a carbon plated shoe on. It didn't feel like I was doing the race in a pair of trainers. So I felt like it was a pretty good test for that shoe, and I'm really impressed with how it did overall. And I will say that in terms of like recovery wise, my legs feel really good. Now, this wasn't exactly an A race for me. It kind of was. It was my 3rd marathon in 8 weeks. Both of those two, Chicago and New York, weren't hard efforts. But I was kind of like building up until this one, and this was going to be like kind of an A- effort. Again, I really wasn't too worried about trying to get another PR on the year because I had already gotten that back in June. And I've got my eyes forward on Tokyo, which I'll be running. That'll be my next marathon. So being able to recover quickly was another concern of mine. And so that made the Superblast a really great choice for me, because like I felt like better after CIM in the Superblast than I felt after New York, which I ran a 3:33. It was a very hot day, but taking it easy, ran a 3:33 in New York in the SC Elite 3. And that could be different because of the courses are different. The weather conditions were different too. It's not just about the shoes, but just to give you a sense of like, this is a shoe that was really easy on the body, and kind of in that sense, it was a great choice for me. But again, I like racing in carbon. I love running in carbon, so I kind of missed the carbon. But overall, if you're someone that's looking for comfort and speed in your marathon race shoe, I think the Superblast is worth consideration. As far as the rest of the kit goes, for the singlet, I had version 1 of the ASICS, I believe it's called the Ventilate Breathe singlet. It's not for sale now. I think it's sold out, and their ASICS website is so weird when you're buying stuff. It doesn't show you stuff that's sold out. And so like I can't find it to give you guys a link in case it goes back up. And when it does restock, like it just reappears. And so like, it's a good singlet, but the one I had is from version 1. Version 2 is the one I actually ran grandmas in. That's a fantastic singlet. It's different than the Ventilate Actibreeze. That's also a good singlet, but it's not the racing, like it's not the highest level race singlet that Asics makes. For shorts, I went with the Rabbit Half Tights. Those are some of my favorites. They've got 2 really nice side pockets plus a zipper back pocket. So sometimes for a race, I'll do 2 gels on each side and then 2 in the back. But for this one, I did carry my hotel key card and a extra GoPro battery in a Ziploc bag, so that way it wouldn't get wet. I put that in the zipper pocket and I went 3 gels on each side in the pockets, and it still does absolutely fine. It looks a little bit bulky, at least in the beginning of the race, but otherwise fit is fine. It doesn't bother me at all, and I just absolutely love running in those half tights. I ran in the same half tights last year at CIM, and I think this is like the 7th or 8th race that I've run in these, and like 4th marathon that I've run in these shorts. So really love the Rabbit Half Tights. I can't speak any more highly of them. I did go with a thin glove layer because it was chilly at the start of the race, and I ended up keeping the gloves on, I think, for the entirety of the race. I don't think I ever took them off. And then for a hat, I went with a Path Projects hat. I had no problems with the kit. Everything worked out fine. This is all stuff that I've raced in before. The shoes were the first time I raced in them, but you know, I already had about 80 miles in the shoe at that point, and I've done mostly marathon effort miles in them and was using them as a workout shoe. So I felt really confident in everything. So nothing really new on race day for me. As far as the nutrition strategy goes, I mentioned I had 6 gels. I've been doing a 6 gel strategy for about 2 years now, and I feel like that really works for me. So I pop a gel basically every 4 miles. I'm lucky enough that I'm not a person that has to have fluid with my gel, so I can kind of just take them whenever I cross the 4-mile marker and then get fluids whenever I need to. And here's where like I'm kind of like been tinkering around a little bit though. Last year I think I did 4 Martins, like 2 calf, 2 regular, and then like a Unived and a Humachia because I wanted to get more electrolytes. More sodium basically in my gels. But since last year's CIM, I've been tinkering around with like getting rid of the sodium, making sure I'm drinking often from like whatever sport drink is on the course, and assuming that that's going to be enough sodium for me. So that's been working for me even on some hotter races, like even at New York when it was like very, very hot. That strategy did work for me as well. 6 gels, 3 caffeinated, 3 non-caffeinated. And I've been kind of like going back and forth and tinkering even with that in terms of when I take the caffeinated and not. Normally I go not caffeinated and then I alternate, not caffeinated, caffeinated, not caffeinated, caffeinated. But I was talking with Megan Featherston before New York, and she was like, take all the caffeinated ones first, like in the beginning, and then take the non-caffeinated ones later. And she's like, because of the amount of time it takes for the caffeine to get into your system and the half-life of caffeine, or like when it starts to degrade and get out of your system. If you're taking them at the end, you know, you're not going to have the benefit of having the caffeine in your system if you took it earlier. And like that made sense to me, and I did that for New York, although I think I did like 2 caffeine, 1 non-caffeine, and then caffeine, not. So I did, like, I kind of mixed it up. But this time I went back to my regular way of like not caffeinated, caffeinated, not like just every other time. Because I do feel like the caffeine, like almost instantly, maybe it's mental. I do feel like even if I take it at mile 20, I'm still feeling the caffeine like right away, and I feel like I'm having it through the rest of the race. So I'm not too worried about that. So I just kind of alternate. I definitely don't do like 2 caffeinated ones in a row, or if I do 2 caffeinated ones in a row, I don't do 3, because then I just feel like that'd be like a lot on the stomach and might be too much, because I do feel like when there's caffeine in the Martin gels, like there's caffeine in the Martin gels. Some other gels, like they might say 50 milligrams of caffeine or even 100 milligrams of caffeine, but it doesn't feel the same as what's in the Martin gels. And so like that's like real caffeine. And I'm someone that drinks like 4 or 5 cups of coffee every day, sometimes 6 or 7. Usually not 6 or 7, but overall the gels went down well, except for the fact that like the last 2, I was audibly complaining. I just didn't want to eat them anymore. But I was able to get them down. I did it. So, and it was fine. No stomach distress, no vomiting after the race or anything like that. Now let's go to the other type of nutrition that was on the course, which is the Nuun Endurance. Nuun is a sponsor for the event. So most races that I've been to usually have Gatorade. This one has Nuun Endurance. It had like the lime flavor, which is not like my favorite Nuun flavor, but it works. Because it was chilly, temperatures were about like 40 degrees at the start. No rain. It had rained all morning, and it felt like it was going to be a very, very cold day. But as the race started, like the gun went off and the rain stopped. So it was like absolutely perfect. The rain I'm being dramatic. The rain might have stopped a little bit before, like when we were in the corrals, but like it pretty much felt like as the race started, the rain stopped. But it was still a little bit chilly, which is perfect racing conditions. Just absolutely fantastic racing conditions. A light wind, but like there's so many big packs at CIM. You can find a way to kind of like dodge it by just getting in on the interior of a gigantic group. And but it's still it's a little bit chilly, and when I'm chilly, I don't get the thirst sensation quite as much. So I definitely delayed getting my first Nuun from an aid station. It probably wasn't until mile 6, which I know is definitely a little bit too late. And then on top of that, sometimes like it felt like the Nuun was really short. Like there wasn't like a lot of time to get the Nuun. And then it was a lot of water, right? So it was like if the aid station was like this long, this much, like the front part would be Nuun and then the rest would be water. And I was like, too much water, not enough Nuun, because I wanted that salt. So that was a little bit annoying, because there was definitely 2 aid stations where I got water when I didn't want water, but I got something at least. And then one of the aid stations, I think the first one, I got water and not Nuun, because like some of the volunteers, and this is my fault, but like, you know, there's a lot of volunteers and they're all like really bunched up tight together. Usually they hold it out the cup like this, so you can like grab it off the hand, or it's, held at the bottom, so it's easy to grab off. But someone like the person that I was getting the first cup from, I thought we had made eye contact. Apparently we didn't, and he was holding it from the top. And I went to go grab the cup, and I think he was waiting for someone else to grab the cup. And so as I'm trying to grab it, he's still holding on to it. I think I ended up dumping an entire like Nuun cup all over all the volunteers. So I'm going through and I'm like, sorry. Nuun! Sorry. And then I grabbed some water. But like, I felt like there was like a couple times where I had to like be aggressive and get the cup from people, which I felt like already I'm like sloshing stuff on people as I go through the aid station. I don't feel like I have to like take it from you either. So like, I don't know. I think maybe just coincidence, whatever, but I had a little bit of a problem, my own fault. It's just getting water, it's just getting Nuun. I should be able to figure that out a little bit better, but fortunately it wasn't a very hot day, so it wasn't fatal to my cause, but I definitely was very thirsty at the end of the race. And so that tells me that I didn't get enough fluid overall, and I definitely did not get enough electrolytes. I was just a little bit light on it. I don't think it ended up being a problem because I didn't like cramp up or anything like that. But, there were parts of the race where I'm starting to feel that edge, later in the race, and not having enough electrolytes can bring that on a little bit earlier. You know what I mean? And so could I have run better had I fueled better? Probably a little bit, not a ton, but probably a little bit. So I think at this point, it's time to head over. We'll take a look at the computer and we'll take a deep dive, and we'll go like 5K at a time, or about as close as I can based on the chip time splits that I have. And we'll really take a look at some of the data. I had 2 watches with me. I had the Polar Ignite 3, which I'm still testing, and also a Garmin 255 Music. So I had both of those watches to look at. So we'll kind of bounce around data, primarily looking at the Polar data and Strava, which is a little bit different, and I'll explain in a little bit, but those are the main things that I'll be looking at. The Polar is easier for me to kind of like zoom in on data, so let's take a look at that. First, I'll take kind of like a global look. 26.54 miles according to my Polar watch. So that's usually about what I get, like 26.5 miles every time I run a marathon. So a little bit longer. I guess I could have run some tangents a little bit better, which is something I think very interesting about this race. This race gives you a lot of road to work with, and so much road that a lot of times people are running on the right-hand side of the road. So if like there's like 2 lanes, a double yellow, and then 2 more lanes, everyone's usually on the right-hand side of the road when they could take up the whole road, or if the road is windy, they can run down the middle. So something that me and some of the people that are running with, I kept like calling out to everyone and being like, let's make sure we run the course and not the road, and try to cut as many tangents as we could. But even so, I still ran 26.54 according to Polar, and Garmin, which I have a feeling is probably the most accurate, gave me 26.36. I do feel like I did a pretty good job on those tangents. So I think that's probably closer to like the actual distance that I ran. All right, so what I want to do is I've switched it over, so I'm looking at this on the x-axis by miles, and we're going to take a look at 5K at a time. Let's zoom in on the first. About 5K, so 3.1-ish miles. The main thing that I want to talk about for the first 5K is kind of like the first big hill. The first mile is a pretty substantial downhill. And again, it's one of those really wide streets. Everyone's trying to get out of the corrals and kind of spread out, but you really want to stay on the right-hand side of the road because you're going to be making a sharp right turn eventually at like 0.9 miles in. And so you don't want to spend too much time on the left-hand side of the road or left-hand side of the road. You want to make sure you're on the right, so that way you don't have that much to travel to get that first tangent. But you know what? You're in mile one. It's not a huge deal if you're on the wrong side of the road based on wherever your corral lines you up. But when you come down at like 0.9 of a mile and then you make that right-hand turn, then you hit like a right turn and you go uphill right away. And you pretty much, it feels like to me that you give everything you went down, you give it all back. In truth, it's about, you give about half of it back in that first big hill. And then you have another hill, you go down again and then you give back another half. So you kind of do the same amount up. If we switch that over to Strava and we look at some of like the early hills, that first hill starts at mile 0.9, it's 284 feet. And I think the way that Strava does it, it takes your GPS tracing and then pulls data from like a table of what, you know, that spot on Earth, the elevation is. And that's why I think even though this data is coming from my Polar Ignite 3, the altitude data is a little bit different. So at 0.9 of a mile, we're at 287 feet. That first hill, it's very subtle, but it's about a quarter mile long and 315 feet. So that's like 25 feet over the course of a quarter mile. So 25 feet doesn't sound like a lot. That's a little bit smaller than Mount Roosevelt if you're familiar with the end of Chicago Marathon. So it's a little bit shorter than that. But you also have another hill right away at 1.3 miles. You have another hill that takes you from 294 feet to 307. So another like 10, 15 feet. So you got two of those right away. And they look small on the screen, and like numbers wise, it sounds small. But if you take a look at it on the map, so we're coming down through here. This is the start line, like kind of like up here. And up this Oak Avenue Parkway is where you're making that first turn. So if we drop this little guy here, this is the hill that you're coming down, Folsom Avenue, where this red truck is, and you're making the right turn like that truck is. And then you're going up this hill following that big work truck here. And so this is what the hill looks like. And I think this is like kind of a better representation of what it is coming up the hill. It's a hill that you'll notice. And I think that the hard thing is everyone comes down that first mile hard because you're kind of like trying to ride that and get some free speed from the gravity of going downhill. And then people have a tendency to try and maintain pace, not effort, as they come up this hill. But the thing is, the hill is longer than kind of like what you see, just because of the way it kind of turns a little bit. And so the hill is, as we saw on the Strava, it's about a quarter mile long, but like it looks long and it feels longer than just, you know, a quarter mile. It levels out, and then you're gonna come down a little bit more, and then you go right into a second hill. And so I think that pretty much almost everything that you kind of like gain on the down in mile one, you give back in 2 doses in mile 2. You don't come back all the way up to the same elevation because it's a roller, but in terms of the amount of climbing that you're doing, it's the same. And so like that part I think is a little bit tricky, and that part is always really stressful for me too, because no matter what, you're going to be near a giant pace group and everyone's really nervous and there's a lot of nervous energy and everyone's worrying if they're hitting the right splits, even though it's just mile 1. And so like, this is kind of like a really frenetic time for me, and I don't like this part of the race, especially because there's two hills that are very easy to overdo it right there in the beginning. And I think that's kind of like the big thing for the first 5K split. And then after that, it kind of just starts to really level off into a nice and gradual decline. All right, let's move to the second 5K. So we'll go to like 6.2-ish and start this like right about there. And so here, there's a big, nice decline, and then you get another little dip where you're coming up again, according to my Polar Watch. Starting at 3.9 miles, we've got 171 feet going up to about 190 feet. So about like 20 feet of an incline. Again, it's going to be something that you notice. Same thing if we're looking at it at mile 4-ish. So we got 209 to about 224. So about 15 feet, at least in terms of what Strava had picked up for me. If we take a look at that one too, it's not a huge hill, but like when you're seeing it in person, it's something that you're definitely going to notice. So I think that's it right here, Hazel and Oak. Not a huge hill, but something that when you're looking at it, when you're trying to maintain marathon pace, you're going to have to make a little bit of adjustment, because you probably want to be focusing on your marathon effort and not just the pace, because this hill is big enough that, you know, it's another matchstick that you'll burn if you try to maintain that pace. So you got to back off a little bit, maintain that marathon effort, and you're going to lose a couple of seconds there going up this hill. But fortunately, it's not too long. And then it kind of levels off, and there's a little bit of rolling that happens after that part as well. And that is pretty much it for the second 5K to 10K. For me, I came through on that total time of 43:16 on the chip time, and another 21:43. So hitting the same 5K split 2 times in a row. All right, let's move to the next 15K marker. So another 5K. So that's going to be 9.32 miles. Or so. And for the most part, we've got a lot of flat, and then we hit another big hill, and let's take a look at it on Strava to see what the satellite says. So that's right here, coming in right at about this 7.5 mile mark, I think. And then hopping all the way up from 170 feet to 207 feet. So not quite as big of a hill when you're looking at it in terms of what Strava sees. So let's take a look at that. 7.4 miles. Now here is that hill. It's not quite as big as 100 feet as my Polar Watch showed. But right here, as you've passed some of these strip malls, which will be a nice spot. You'll see a lot of like crowd support at that intersection. You start to see that hill. And again, none of these hills are huge, but these are definitely something that you will notice. It is a hill, and you'll certainly feel it. So that's kind of like the big thing that I noticed from that third 5K. The split for this 5K was 22:02. So lost about 19 seconds on this 5K. I want to say it's because of that hill, but probably not. I think I'm just kind of like falling into a rhythm, trying to eat some gels, and trying to make sure I'm getting all that water. Crossing the 15K mark at 1 hour and 5 minutes and 18 seconds by chip time. All right, next we're coming up on the 20K mark, which is 12.4 miles. This is a nice section because it's mostly just downhill or pretty even. There's a little bit of a blip here right at 10.3 miles, but for the most part, it's nice and smooth. One of my favorite parts of the course is through here though, as you're going through Fair Oaks. There's a place called Sherwood Florist, and I don't know why, but like the pun of that just always really entertains me, and I love seeing it every time. It's because you make this turn and you're coming through here up a hill a little bit, and there's that Sherwood Florist, and I don't know why that sign always just puts a big smile on my face. And there's an aid station right through here too, so there's like, it's been quiet for a little bit. You come up this hill, the aid station is on the uphill, which I feel like is a nice way to kind of like disguise an uphill, so I really appreciate that. And so you get some hydration, you get to see some crowds, and you get to come through a nice little town here, Fair Oaks. And I do really like this portion, even though there is a hill here, you don't really notice it because you're probably trying to focus on trying to down some nuun as fast as you can without getting it all over yourself. All right, after that, you're very quickly onto the half marathon mark. And for us, we came through at 1:31:54. That's where the half marathon relay exchange happens. So there's like a fresh injection of like new runners that are coming into the course. There's a lot of crowd support right at that spot. Let's look at 25K to 30K, miles 15 to 18. I feel like this is one of the more fun parts of the course, but also one of the more dangerous parts of the course as well. So, and there is a little bit of uphill, but from here, from mile 17 on, it starts a very long and very gradual downhill. And so that's a really fun part for me. I really like it. That's also a time in a race where I tend to get very impatient and start to kind of like feel like I need to start pushing a little bit. And so, and it's right around at that 2 hour mark. Probably because a lot of my workouts tend to be about 2 hours to 2 hours and 20 minutes long. So probably something I need to work on a little bit. But at that 2 hour mark, I usually start to get really antsy and I start to push. And if I have a little bit of a downhill, I can do that really easily, but it also can lead me to kind of like burn too many matches in the match too soon. And so I feel like I did a really good job this year of being very patient and being very disciplined. I had Drew jump in and pace for miles 15 to 25. And so like his only job was to make sure we didn't go too hot. And he did a fantastic job of that. So that was a lot of fun to kind of ride that roller coaster. And for 25 to 30K, we came in, it was, I think, the fastest 5K split of the entire race, but not by a ton. Came in at 21:34, so 9 seconds faster than the first 5K and then the second 5K. And then coming in at 21:34. And I feel like that was pretty much right on pace because then we were running, the pace was 6:51 minutes per mile, which is 3 hour pace, which is kind of like really where we wanted to be for that kind of part of the race. So that part was flawlessly executed. All right, if we move to the next part of that, 30 to 35K, you're still riding a lot of that hill until you get to about like the 20 mile mark. So that was just a lot of fun for me. I really enjoyed that. As you're approaching the 20 mile marker, they've got these like, you're about to break through the barrier, kind of like they have signs up that are really fun. And then eventually you'll hit that 20 mile marker. And things are feeling pretty good for me. At this point, like I'm starting to get nervous that like the hurt is about to happen, but it hasn't happened yet. And I think that kind of like just that fear of it kind of had the same effect as if I had actually felt the hurt at that point. And so that's something that was an interesting like kind of mental observation after the fact, is that I definitely got scared once I saw the 20 mile markers. But overall I was feeling good, and I was kind of like thinking like, this is a nice spot because it levels out for a little bit there, that I would really like to have some of that carbon, especially because I knew that I still had a little while to go before I hit the bridge in this course, which then from then I know I still have like a good like 8K left. So like I was a while from the mark that meant I still had 8K left. So I was like, there's still a lot of race here. And this is really where, right at this 20 mile mark where it levels out, where I really wished I would have had some carbon, just something to just a little bit extra, just to give me a little bit something here. We slowed down a little bit through this 5K section down to 21:50, but overall I feel like that puts us kind of like right about where we thought we'd be, in between 3 hours and 3:05. And so like overall I felt pretty good about this one, although I kind of like felt like, you know, this is where the wheels came off last year. So I was kind of waiting for that like hammer to drop. It never really did. But I kind of did kind of wilt a little bit coming in that next 5K. So let's go to 35K to 40K. So right here at that 21 mile mark, that's where you hit like the bridge, and I'll pull it back a little bit so we can get a better sense of what that climb is like. So again, according to the Polar Watch, I had it from like about, you know, there's like an incline before you get to the bridge, you know, and I don't think the bridge was that big. Again, this is, I think the Polar Watch is inflating things a little bit. It went from 35 feet to 132 feet. So again, I don't think it was 100 feet. If we go to Strava for that one, here, this is what the blip is down here. So it goes from like 49 feet to, wait, let's see, 49 feet to 52 feet. That's also not right. So it's going to be a little bit more than like 3 feet of an incline. Let's take a look at it on the map here. So after the 20-mile mark, it feels like you come down a little bit, but then as you're like at the bottom of this right hand, like very gentle right hand, you can start to see everyone going up the hill. And so as you come up, you go up for a little while, and then finally, then you're eventually up on this bridge. So, I mean, the amount of grade that you're going is from, you know, down here where this is like these houses were grade from where you were up here, and like you're pretty much like basically going up kind of like a little bit more than a flight of stairs, like more like 1.5 stories up, until you eventually get up to here, which is where you're over the bridge. So that gives you a sense of just how much climbing you actually did. But this is a bridge. There's usually like a drum corps that's out there, so it's nice and noisy. Lots of people cheering you on there as well, and you get a really nice view of the sun as you're going over the bridge. It's a nice point in the morning, but it's always a bit like demoralizing for me to be on this part of the course, because here is where I'm really already starting to hurt. You do get a nice little decline on the way down, but I know that there's about 5 miles left of the race after this point. And this is a part of the race that I just don't like, because that last 5 miles just feels really, really long. For the most part, it's pretty flat, and there's not much to worry about. Something that I always look forward to is the big Johnny Cash mural that's over there, but that usually don't see till about like mile 25 or so, I want to say. My watch picked up a little bit of a blip here. I don't know that there's actually like a hill at that point in the course. As you're turning, making these turns, you have to make like, you go down, you make a quick left and a quick right. It might be a little bit of an incline, and let me take a look at it on the map. On Strava, I'm not really showing much of anything on there, but it's right around at the bank. You make a left, and there isn't a hill there. I don't know what the watch picked up, but it stays pretty flat, and then you make a pretty quick right away, and you start getting towards what I think is like a hospital, something like that. Over here, after you go under the bridge, there's usually like a DJ that's right underneath the bridge. It's nice. Nice and loud, really nice and helpful as well. But still, usually the main thing that you see is a lot of people that are struggling at the end of this race. At this point, when you go under this overpass, you still have a little bit over 1.25 miles left in the race. So there's a little bit more to go there, but once you get there, you're pretty much almost there. So it's time to kind of like give it the rest of what you got. You're pretty much running through pretty pancake flat downtown Sacramento. You're gonna start seeing the barricades along the sides of the road. You're gonna start seeing a lot more people, a lot more noise. And then you're going to kind of pass the finish line, because you'll pass the Capitol building, and you'll pass the finish line area, and you kind of go out and you make 2 quick lefts. This year, it was a little bit different. Last year, pretty sure it was like men on one side, women on the other. This year they had it split up by like A and B. And some people, it seemed to be a lot more random. So some people were A bibs and some people had a little B on their bibs. Some of the people that I ran with at the beginning of the race were B and I was A. And so like you just make a left and you make another quick left, and then boom, you're like about 150 meters from the finish line. So like once you make that, you've been on that one long last road and hit that 26-mile marker. Once you make that first left, know that you got like a little bit more than a 1/4 mile left. So that's really a good place to start your final kick. Or if you're gonna wait a little bit longer and give it 150 meters to finish, then that second left turn, once you can see the finish line, give it everything you got. There's not a lot of race left at that point. So it's just a matter of just like soaking it all in. Everyone's there and it's a really good time. And it just is a lot of fun. I love the way that this race finishes. So that is the California International Marathon. In total, I had 951 feet of ascent and 689 feet of descent, which as we've seen as we've gone through it, might be a little bit inflated in both the up and the down. But I think overall in the net, you're losing about 250 feet over the total distance of the course, and that feels about right. On Strava, has me at 620 feet of total elevation, and if you put like the course, I think they tell you 280 feet of descent, so that puts me at like 900 feet of descent. total. So that's really what you're doing in terms of downhill over the course of 26.2. And I do think that that elevation is probably closer to 620 than it is what I got on my Polar of 690, but anywhere between 620 and 690 feet of climbing over the course of this race. So it's not a downhill race. There's a net downhill to it, but so is Boston is a net downhill as well. So it's not quite as rigorous as Boston. I feel like it's basically rolling hills for the first half and mostly downhill for the second, I think is a more fair way to put it, or a more accurate way to put it for this race. So if you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the comments down below. Even if it's later in the year, the way that I usually check my YouTube, new comments always bubble to the top on the apps that I use to check comments. So I'll see it and hopefully I can answer any questions you might have. Or better yet, stop by the live stream I do Monday through Friday right here on YouTube. I always love to talk to you guys in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks for making it all the way to this end of this very long video. I appreciate that. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on, baby?